But let's lay the foundations that underpin good counseling practice, and speak about the theory of existential therapy. Everyone's giggling at my pronunciation, Rory.
Yes, and I think that's a great way to start. Your kind of stumbling to some extent of the word is indeed an existential crisis. Yep. of not knowing the meaning. And I think that leads us in nicely to what existentialism is. Existentialism is it's not really a philosophy. It's like a train of thought, is that, we live and we die. And in between those two distinct points in time, we have to make decisions in our life to find meaning. And in fact, this was really kicked off by someone who, we will all know if we've studied person-centered therapy, and that's Søren Kierkegaard. Søren Kierkegaard was a Danish philosopher, and he struggled a lot with existence. He had a number of siblings, all who died young, and he was afraid of dying because in those days, you could die very easily. He didn't have the medicines that we have now. And he wrote a book which has to, the title of which has to be the most accurate title of any book I've ever seen. And it's called Fear and Trembling, Ken.
I like it.
The book was called Fear and Trembling.
On many levels.
Yeah. And it was about the fear of existence. And I guess that's the roots, the base of existential therapy. And as Rollo May, as Irving Yalom very famously observed in 1980, there's 4 givens in the human condition: death, meaning, isolation, and freedom. And an existential therapist would try to help the client identify the meaning of their lives through their own goals, if you like, what it means to exist. And an example of that might be someone going through an existential crisis, say an athlete who finds themselves not being able to compete at the same level and having to retire. They would go through an existential crisis. What does the world hold for me now? What do I do? What meaning do I put in my life after all this work? And an existential therapist would help you with that.
It's an interesting thought train, as you kind of called it there, Rory, existentialism. And it kind of, it roots itself in the fact that I guess we all get to a point in our life where we go, hold on a second, I'm going to die someday. And that in itself is existential thought. The fact that we're looking at our life and going, there's an end to this life as we know it. And I guess with that comes a great responsibility. And the responsibility is, this is our life. We make decisions within our life. And we are responsible for the decisions that we make and sometimes the outcomes that those decisions will bring. I think there's great comfort in sitting and thinking that we are bobbing around in the ocean of life and we are subject to the waves that hit us this way and that way, and that we don't really have a say and it's not really me. But existentialism says it is you, and you're going to die one day, and you got this life and you need to live it, and you need to make the decisions, and you need to explore who you are, learn who you are, and take responsibility for the decisions that you make.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope we're not getting people too down with the opening part of this podcast. So like death, anxiety, why am I here? What I would say is that there's a really, really good book written by Erich Fromm, who was a psychotherapist, and he wrote a book called Escape from Freedom. And I read it a few years ago, and I think it really summed the human condition up. He said that, we've only, and I talk about the Western world, there are still some places in the world where people are held as slaves. And indeed, in the Western world, we see slavery still. But when we're allowed to do what we want, we fear the freedom that brings. And that creates an anxiety. So as we have more freedom, and you do hear it, where shall I go on holiday? What shall I do? What shall I do in my spare time? And sometimes we struggle to work with the freedom we have, and that is about goals and decision making. And I'd recommend it a read to it's a good read for anybody who wants to try and understand the more existential parts of our existence. You know, the fact that we have choices and we can do things, not for everybody, I accept that. But for those who can, sometimes the limiting factor is our own view of the world. And there's a great song by U2 called Get Out of Your Own Way.
Cool.
And I often play it when I'm thinking about, you know, I can't do this and I can't do that. And it reminds me that, you know, life's possibilities are endless. You are in charge of your own life. And I think an existential therapist will guide you to that and help you look for the meaning in your life. We're meaning searching creatures, Ken.
It's interesting. You kind of led into that, speaking about maybe the depressive side of speaking about death and anxiety, which is all part of the existential way of thinking, of looking at stuff. And the thought is that with our lives having an end point, a death point, it gives meaning to the life that you live. You know, this is the moment that you get to live. So although it can, I guess, just speaking about the topic, feel like it has a depressive side to it, it isn't. It's actually quite an optimistic side if you really delve down deeper into the thought pattern. And I think there's a lot to it, and there's a lot to get your head around when you're speaking about existentialism. And it's going to be about you and how you see it and what you make of it. So it is very individualistic, I guess, in so many ways. Rory's created an incredibly super duper handout. I've been reading over it this morning. It's really nice. It gives lots of food for thought. And I want to share a few things. So key lessons from this therapy. Nothing is fixed. All is movement. You know, that's the very first part of the handout there. And I was thinking about that. You know, if you look to Buddhism, that's one of the key principles of Buddhism, is that the only thing that is constant is change. You know, we try to hang on to how it is now. Oh, it's nice now, so I want to hang on to this. Or it's not nice now, I want to get past this and go to a different place. We're always kind of either wanting to cling on or wanting to move past something. And the thought that nothing is fixed, that all is in movement, I think has got a comforting side to it. At some point, we are constantly discovering and making sense of our lives. That's point 2 there. And how true is that? I mean, as therapists, we're encouraged to do personal development, and personal development is making sense of our lives. So I think that a lot of it would match in, and there's loads of stuff here. One of them that is jumping out to me here, and maybe this again keys into the depressive side, but does it, or is it true? And it is ultimately, we are alone and separate. It's interesting, isn't it? Are we? Or does our friendships and our relationships with others matter? And this is the thing about existentialism. It's really interesting. And there's lots to read about. Anxiety is hard to escape, whether existential, based on honesty with self about human life, or neurotic, based on fear of losing control. I could spend a week just on that sentence, Rory.
Yeah, you can understand why Sartre and you know, and de Beauvoir and all the other existential, well, I say philosophers, it's not really philosophy, could spend hours sat in cafes on the banks of the French River, talking about this, you know, and drinking coffee, because it's such a deep, it's very, very deep, isn't it? It's asked the fundamental question, you know, why are you here? What's your purpose in life? Why do you exist? And they're not easy questions to answer. And you may have different answers, if you find an answer indeed, at different parts of your life. And, you know, I don't know about you, Ken, but if you think about maybe relationships or jobs that you were in, and you think, I could never leave this, this is as good as it gets. And then maybe through circumstances, the choice isn't yours, you have to go. And then you look back a few years later and you say, why did I stay there? Why did I stay there? The fear of doing something was actually inhibiting, you know, the fact that that there's no more than this. And once one takes control of that and says, you know, I will take a risk, I will try something, you are living really an existential life, because you're living with the anxiety and the fear of the decisions you make, but within that, you've taken control of your own life.
I like that. just looking at how this, how does this key into a therapeutic process? And there's three main parts to the therapeutic process when working existentially, and that is clarify the client's assumptions about the world. So this is the frame of reference that they might hold if we go to a person-centered way of describing that. Then examine the source and authority of the client's current value systems. Now that's interesting because that to me kind of has a bit of a ring of behaviorism to it, to the ABC model there. And then encourage the client to take this new awareness and put it into action. Like you were saying, Rory, it's kind of, I guess there is a slight overlapping to the coaching system there, where you would aim towards something and then help the client to reach that point. Examine what's going on for you now. Examine the validity of that. Where did it come from? Where did you get that information? Where did you form that belief or that truth, as you call it, in your life? And then if that changes, well, first of all, the encouragement to kind of challenge that. And then when you do reach that new awareness, that aha moment, how are you going to put that into action and how's it going to make a difference in your life? So there's kind of a very simplistic ABC of the therapeutic process.
Yeah. And I'll share with you a little kind of pastiche of my life. Many years ago, as a younger man, I always wanted to learn to dive into a swimming pool, but I could, even though I paid for lessons, I could never crack it, and it was a source of a bit of angst, really, because I'm a reasonable swimmer, and but the diving, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't throw myself in, and I remember stood at the deep end of the swimming pool one day, thinking I'll have another go. And this little girl, she'd be about 8 or 10, kind of went next to me and she looked at me. She said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going to dive in." I said, "But I'm not sure how to do it." And she looked at me and she said, "Well, you do it like this," and dived in. And I thought, fair enough, I'll do it like that. And I hurtled myself into the water. It wasn't the most elegant of dives, but I'd let go of her. She'd helped me in her innocence, let go of her feet. You just do it like this. It's not that big a deal, really. You just do it like this.
Yeah.
And once I'd done it, I mean, people at the swimming pool must have thought it was odd. I just kept getting out and diving in again. I must have been there for an hour, just getting out and diving in.
Ooh, I like
and I know. And it was just really bizarre. And sitting in the car on the way home, I pondered about why it was an 8 or 10-year-old girl that gave me the confidence to dive in, and what was it that was holding me back? And I think it was just the fact that being with someone who was saying, "Well, it's okay, just do this," and in a way that was kind of therapeutic, because that's what a therapist does. They set the ground to be able to say to people, "Well, why not?
Yeah,
why not? That's the existential elements of it. Why not?"
I like the realness of what you've shared there, Rory. The congruence of it, I guess. So if we link that back to the model we just spoke about, the 3 points there, clarified the client's assumption about the world. Rory standing there going, "This diving is a scary venture. Yes. I feel a little bit of fear here. I don't really want to do this. I don't know how to do this, but I do want to do it. I want to have accomplished it, but there is something standing in the way." Examine the source and authority of the client's current value system. Little 8-year-old girl comes along, says, "What you doing? You do it like this," and jumps off. It kind of really puts into perspective. Hold on a second. Let me examine my belief over here. And then the third point, encourage the client to take this new awareness and put it into action. Rory jumping off the diving board, getting out the pool, going back up the diving board, jumping off the diving board, getting out the pool, going back up the diving board. There it is. You've now had a lesson on existential therapy with a live example.